Islam's Theft of Europe, again. This is Aben al-Hurriya, Son of Freedom. This will be part 2 of the presentation. Palestinians have rejected offers of statehood 5 separate times. The Peel Commission report of 1937 proposed a two-state solution in which the Arabs would get 80% of Palestine. Israel would get 20%. Israel accepted. Palestinian people rejected. The UN partitioned Palestine in 1947. Israel declared statehood. Israel is attacked by Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, Egypt, Syria. Israel wins. Camp David 2000. Israel offers Gaza 94% of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The PLO rejects. In 2008, Israel renews the offer of 2,000 plus additional land. The PLO rejects again. The only acceptable partition to the Arabs is for Israel to be annihilated. Economic political linkage. The following statement from the Parliamentary Association for Euro-Arab Cooperation illustrates the linkage which the Arab community was imposing on Europe. Quote, the association requires European governments to arrange legal provisions concerning the free movement and respect for the fundamental rights of immigrant workers in Europe. These rights must be equivalent to those of national citizens. The association considers the political settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict an absolute necessity for the establishment of a real Euro-Arab cooperation, unquote. This is approximately 1974. In other words, the Arab community at every turn was holding Europe's access to Middle East oil hostage to Europe's allowing the annihilation of Israel, and all of this in flowery language that only a diplomat can appreciate. Euro-Arab dialogue continues to pressure Europe during 1975. Dr. Ibrahim A. Obaid, Saudi Arabia's Director General of the Ministry of Petroleum, at the Amsterdam meeting said, quote, together and as equals, the Europeans and the Arabs can, through a strategy of interdependence, forge ahead to remove the thorn from their sides, the Israeli problem, and attend to the Herculean task ahead of them, end quote. Obaid stipulated that for the sake of peace, the European community should stop all military and economic assistance to Israel and work for the Israeli withdrawal from, quote, occupied territories, unquote. Euro-Arab dialogue continues to pressure Europe during 1975. Obaid further says, quote, the Arab-Israeli conflict and the oil problem are not only related but inseparable. Had it not been for the said conflict, the oil weapon would not have been unleashed, end quote. A background doctrine from Islamic theology is that once a territory has been overrun by jihadi warriors, as is the case for Palestine, such territory becomes forever the possession of the Ummah. And antecedent to that, all the earth is a waqf for Allah, that is, a possession of Allah, so that jihad is merely the recovery of land stolen from Allah by the infidel. 1990 Cairo Declaration of Human Rights in Islam. This document is adopted by the member states of the OIC. It is a de facto rejection of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. It is an attempt to create a parallel Islamic world and to reject the principles of freedom and human rights enshrined in the UDHR. It makes frequent reference to Sharia law in such a way that while the specific content of Sharia law is not called out in the CDHRI itself, the content and force of Sharia law is fully operative in the CDHRI. It is the replacement document for the UDHR if and when the Universal Caliphate comes to exist, or when the OIC as a voting bloc can replace the UDHR. It is emblematic of Islamic supremacism. Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, 1991. This is an example of civilization jihad strategy. Recommendation 1162 addresses the poor image of Islam in Europe. It seeks to correct, quote, historical errors, end quote, and, quote, the oversimplified approach of the media, end quote, toward Islam. Seeks to correct the account of the history of Islam in European history textbooks. Seeks to increase the number of professorial posts in Islam and Arabic language in European universities. Seeks to add courses and curriculum in Islam in law schools and schools of theology, and it seeks to create a Euro-Arab university called the Averroes Program as a counterbalance to the existing Erasmus and Demosthenes programs. Myth of Andalusian utopia. This is a myth held up to European leaders of a future peaceful political arrangement, or otherwise known as a peaceful caliphate, which the Arab world seeks to import and implant into Europe. It is based on a false image of the conditions that existed in medieval Spain. It is alleged that during that time, Spain was an idyllic paradise of tolerance between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. It seeks to legitimize Muslim immigration into Europe on the basis that Islam made Europe what it is today. This suppresses the fact that the medieval Muslim immigration came from jihadi warfare. This myth has its origins in France during the 17th and 18th centuries. This myth is an obscene glossing over the genocide and murder of millions and the enslavement of millions more in Europe in the medieval period. The myth of the Andalusian utopia minimizes the legacy of the Greek, Roman, and Byzantine empires. It stresses the superiority of Islamic culture and how Islamic culture redeemed Europe from its obscurantism. A theme that is regularly presented is that since Europe owes its cultural legacy to Arab Islamic civilization, Europe owes the Arab world technology transfers back to the mother culture and, more generally, to allow Islamic actors in the present free access to purify the culture of Europe. Such is the supremacist attitude of Arab Islamic actors. Islamic doctrine prohibits the allowing of influence of other cultures and at the same time demands acknowledging of Islamic supremacy. The historical fact is that Islamic culture gained most of its knowledge from other cultures, Greek, Roman, Judeo-Christian, Armenian, Persian, and Hindu, whose knowledge they stole in the course of jihad. The Islamic doctrine of the inferiority of the infidel forces the Islamic world to engage in historical revisionism. This sense of Islamic superiority enshrined in Islamic doctrine demands an obsequiousness from European leaders to which they yield. Another propaganda tool is for Islamic actors to replace the use of Judeo-Christian civilization with Abrahamic civilization, since in Islamic propaganda, Abraham was a Muslim prophet. This revisionism is just one more way of delegitimizing Judaism and Christianity and annihilating Jewish history. Europe's Jewish-Christian roots are being back revised out of existence. Present-day takeover of Europe. One of Bat-Yor's contributions to our understanding of the Islamic threat comes from her study of Dimitude. See her book, The Decline of Eastern Christianity Under Islam. Dimitude is based on such passages as Quran 929 and many more in the Quran and the Hadith. Dimitude in the medieval period was an outcome of kinetic jihad. It resulted in a state of enforced and permanent subjugation, including the paying of a heavy tribute, including devshirme, that is, the extracting of young boys and constricting them into military training to fight your empire's wars for you, and the gradual loss of a people's identity and memory, the rewriting of history, the erasure, the annihilation of peoples. Islamic actors are seeking the same outcome today in Europe, but using a more subtle set of tactics. Rather than overt warfare yet, Islamic actors use terrorism, and Islamic actors use civilization jihad in the form of political warfare, propaganda, and cultural warfare. Dimification demands that Europe exhibit a servile attitude toward the Islamic world. Dimification demands that Europe acknowledge the supremacy of Islam. For example, Sheikh Jamal Shakir Nazal on the 2nd of May 2003 in a sermon in Fallujah, Iraq, said, quote, "It was the Islamic State that established the beacon of science for all of humanity in the spheres of engineering and law. The era of the Islamic State, that is Andalusia, became a golden age at a time when Europe was living a life of ignorance, like beasts, without its people knowing law, human rights, or women's rights. Islam arrived and illuminated the minds of man," end quote. Needless to say, this rewriting of history is a gross inversion. In the classical expression of dhimmitude, dhimmis were forbidden, on pain of death, to appeal for help to outsiders or to criticize their subjugated state. In the present-day Europe, dhimmitude is expressed in the glossing over of the reality of jihad, in an unwillingness to criticize the prophet, the Islamic canonical literature, or the present-day expression of Islam, in self-abasement and self-guilt. This is done in the name of multiculturalism, which is a form of cultural relativism. This cultural relativism is enforced by intellectuals like Edward Said, Rashid Khalidi of Colombia, or by co-opted interfaith clerics in Europe. The large financial outlays presently being made from Europe to the Arab world are a modern form of the tribute, jizya, of a dhimmi state. It should be noted that, as civilization jihad advances, the level of violence in jihad also advances, as Islamic actors are emboldened to become more overt and less covert in their methods of jihad. This is Islam's Theft of Europe, again. Abin al-Hurriya, Son of Freedom. This ends part 2.